Hey everyone, so I am back talking about 5 reasons that you should avoid processed food. So I've been talking about my real food journey and my story and why it's so important that I switched to real food and how it's really changed my life and my family's life, and why I'm so passionate about sharing this information with others in hopes of changing their own lives. But in order to understand why we really need to eat real food, we need to understand why we need to avoid processed food. So let's talk about what processed food is. Processed food is food that is man-made and chemically altered or taken from nature, then stripped down and kind of repurposed into something that we're labeling as food. It is packaged and has added chemicals, preservatives, dyes, coloring, and everything else to add texture, to provide a longer shelf life, to provide just the right amount of tastiness where you want to keep eating it over and over, even if you are full or you've had enough calories for the day, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So these are on the shelf, and it's the majority of each supermarket and grocery store that offers these types of foods. Some examples are chips, pretzels, bagged and prepackaged items. So now that we know what a processed food is, does this really make any sort of difference to our bodies? And the answer is yes, it does. Our bodies are meant to break down whole and real foods, not man-made chemicals and man-made components. So it plays out in our body in a couple of ways. And here I'm just going to go through 5 ways that this happens and what happens inside your body and why we should avoid them. And the first one is your cancer risk is directly associated with your consumption of processed foods. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you're consuming 10% more processed foods, you have an increased risk of cancer at 10%. So why does this happen? Because your body is stuck filtering out these chemicals, and it can't always keep up, especially if you're consuming processed food as the majority of your diet. And some of these chemicals that are in the foods actually mimic and or alter your genetic makeup, and they can cause all types of other health issues as well. And the more times your cells have to reproduce, or the more times they're affected by a certain chemical, the more likely they are to change or not be filtered out properly, which is where cancer comes from. And second on our list is you are much more likely to overeat and constantly be craving and feel hungry while eating processed foods. This is because processed foods have very little to no nutrient value in terms of what our body needs. Our body needs to pull nutrients and macros for itself from real food. Genetically altered food or processed food does not give any nutrients to our body. So our body is stuck breaking down chemicals, trying to filter everything out, and pulling no nutrients at all. So you end up craving and still hungry. And some of the chemicals do actually stimulate your brain to want more. So you're in a vicious cycle of wanting more, getting no nutrients. Your body will continue to ask for more food until you get it. So you're overeating empty calories that provide nothing to your body. This also bogs down your metabolism. Your metabolism burns the best and the quickest with real food. And when it's not getting any nutrients, your body says, time to conserve. So it slows and it keeps everything in that it can. And if you're already overweight or you're trying to lose weight, this obviously is problematic. And real food can help you solve or alleviate a lot of those cravings and overeating and that type of problem. Rates of autoimmune and inflammatory disorders have increased over the last few decades with more processed food consumption. As I've already mentioned, the chemicals that are inside of these provide kind of a low level of inflammation constantly inside your body. Now you need inflammation for an immune response, for a proper immune response to fight off germs and diseases. However, having a constant reaction going on in your body kind of creates that overload situation, and this is where your genetics can be triggered on if you're already genetically prone to these types of disorders, or the level of inflammation is just too high, so it aggravates and you begin to have symptoms of these disorders. And next is processed foods have a lot of dyes, artificial sweeteners, and other chemicals. These dyes have been known to be harmful to your body, can cause or mimic other processes in your body like adrenal health, and you can end up with things like adrenal fatigue, and they can cause cancer, and also related to that inflammation and these other parts that we've been talking about, they can also cause trouble for your heart and your cardiovascular system, and the way that fats are processed and your arteries move, and whether they become more rigid and lose their flexibility, which can lead to heart disease. So having these additional things in your diet, you just don't need them, and by switching to real food, you avoid these processes, then helping you avoid those diseases. Processed foods also have a lot of sodium, sugar, and added fats. These are not healthy at all, and no home-cooked meal or baked item would contain that level of salt, sugar, or added fat naturally. So by using a real food product, you are providing more nutritional value for those items, and you're keeping the amount lower. The reason why processed foods have such a high amount is to make up for what's been stripped out or what they're creating to add excessive flavor or more to trigger your brain to continue to eat that. So you will never have that in a home-cooked meal or a home-cooked baked item, because the levels would be much lower and they're totally in your control, and you know what you're putting into the food item. So what are some of the worst offenders? So deli meats, bacon, sausage, those can be the worst, but you can find real food items to use for these things that are healthy for you. You can make your own sausage, or you can get the meats from a farmer that you know is not processing them with chemicals. The same thing for the bacon. And you can find, if you look and you read the ingredients label, you can find some of these products that are unprocessed in the grocery store. For example, I recently just found a Just Bacon product at Walmart, and it had no additives or preservatives or anything other than the bacon in it, which was fantastic. You have to look and you have to know what you're looking for, but you can find them. And again, getting from farmer is always the best, because then you can ask questions and you know exactly where it came from. Next is sweetened beverages. Honestly, no one needs sweetened beverages now. I'll tell you that I had a struggle with sweetened beverages. I was a Pepsi addict back in college during the same days that I've already talked about, and it was hard to get off of it. The sweets, the sugar, the caffeine, and the added chemicals that the industry puts in to keep you hooked on it are hard to get off of. But they really created the sweetened beverage industry. We didn't have water sweetener shooters, little containers where you shoot the sweetener into your water before, and you don't need that. It's really just an empty calorie part of a diet that causes more harm than good in our culture right now. And the same thing with juice. It might be nice to have a glass of juice every now and then at a special breakfast, but to have it on a weekly or daily basis is really unnecessary and has become part of our culture that doesn't need to be so. It just adds more sugar, and that added sugar just adds to waistlines, leading to things like diabetes and other types of health problems. Quick and packaged meals are another offender. If you're grabbing a bag, you're dumping and warming, that's processed food. Same thing if you grab it out of the freezer and stick it in the microwave and warm it, processed food. There are so many chemicals and components put into those to preserve that type of food and to make it taste better with no nutritional value. So there's no point in those, and you can take any of those meals that you love and make them from scratch in a healthy, real foods way that eliminates all of these things that cause so much trouble in our bodies. And last is commercially made sweets, treats, and other bakery items. You can make these all at home yourself. Buy some simple ingredients, cook them up, and know that what you're eating is just whole food ingredients and nothing more. The other trick here, which is nice, is that you know you have to put in the effort and the time to bake these items, so you're going to enjoy them when you have them, and then they're going to be gone until you put that effort in again. It gets rid of that ease of grabbing sweet treats anytime you feel like it. So it kind of helps with your waistline, but it also helps with your health. So what should you be eating? Go right to the source, stick with nature, find your ingredients, and make a meal out of it. It's that simple. Not to mention that it's so much tastier. Everything is so much more delicious. When you finally stop eating processed food, or as you transition off, you will realize that your senses have been numbed and you have not been tasting properly or the same way. And when you start eating real food, it's shocking, and the flavors are so much better that you can't even remember how it used to be. Now, it's hard at first because everything tastes different and your senses are completely off from having so much processed food, sodium, fats, and sugars. So it takes a bit of time, but the more you transition, the better you'll feel and the better everything will taste. So if you need a little bit more help with this and you want a swap guide, you can get that on my website, simplymindfulwellness.com. On my blog, there are a lot of different guides that you can grab there, but I have a real food quick start guide that you can grab just by joining my email list right on the homepage. So if you put in your email, you'll get the guide delivered right to you. You get some real food swaps, reasons to switch to real food, meal planning tips and tools, and a few recipes as well. So head on over to my website, simplymindfulwellness.com. Grab your free guide, and if you liked this video, please click like below and share it with your friends. Thanks, I'll see you next time.